You ready to go? Ready for a good day on the podcast,
It's
Mal?
a good day to have a good day, people.
Welcome to Emotionships, where we talk about the real reason everything happens for a reason. I'm your host, Charlie Carroll, along with my capricious co-host, Mallory Redmond.
I do not even know what that means.
Oh, you're going to have to look it up.
Ah.
Would you like to Google it?
Right now?
No, you don't have to, but you can.
Oh. Did you ever drink Capri Sun growing up?
I did. I was so ticked off at Capri Sun.
Why is that?
My mom used to put them in my lunch, and I don't know if it was because of, dealing with school or not being the best student in the world at the time, that I would always stab through.
What? I am not. Am I?
Do you want to read the definition of capricious to our audience?
No, thank you. Given to sudden and unaccountable changes of mood or behavior. You were ready for that one too. You were thinking about it. What did I do?
Not a thing. I'm happy. I would not exchange you for the world here at Emotionships or on Emotionships, the podcast.
Thanks.
Yes.
That's nice. All right. Why did Capri Sun tick you off?
Because just proving my point over here, ladies and gentlemen. I used to stab through it.
Yeah, we all did.
I mean, that was frustrating.
What do you mean? Wait, what do you mean? You used to...
You had to stab it in order to get...
That's the way that you drink it.
I know, but I would stab through both sides of it. I think I was a little tense.
A little aggressive.
Yeah.
Okay, what's that about? What's the emotionship there, my friend?
I probably just did not feel good enough. Nevertheless, This is the week of our first presidential debate, and I think we are 35 days out before the election.
Oh, wow.
You know what I was thinking?
But who's counting?
You know what I was thinking? Maybe we want to do? Obviously, the election takes place on a Thursday. I thought that...
Oh.
What?
It's a Tuesday.
Is it a Tuesday?
Yeah.
I always thought it was a Thursday. I think you're right.
Elections are always on Tuesdays.
I thought Thursday for some reason. Oh, well, because it's a Tuesday, I thought maybe the week leading up to the actual election, we podcast every day.
Oh.
An election series.
Oh, my.
Would you text us as to whether or not this is interesting, an interesting idea to you?
I mean, maybe we should ask Gilman.
Oh, our producer. Hold on one second. Gilman?
Or Gelman. We don't know. We don't know if he's Gilman or Gelman.
Depends on the day. Well, we'll get his opinion, but you can text us at 937-303-4788 and tell us your opinion if we should podcast every day.
Election's on a Tuesday, we're just going to do a lot of like aftermath podcasting.
Well, we'll do it building up to the election a couple days.
Oh, the week before the election.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just thought maybe it would be a good idea.
Yeah, I'll text you my opinion.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I also thought? Having this great device where it's connected, my phone is connected to our podcasting board. I thought, I was interested earlier in whether or not the White House had a phone number. And I found their phone number here. I just Googled the White House's phone number. And I thought maybe it would be interesting to call it.
Haven't you ever seen the movie what is that movie? The American President seems like a dumb name for a movie, but I think that was it.
Okay.
Yeah, where she would call him at the White House.
Well, here's what's interesting. When I Googled the White House, it comes up on Google, residential building in Washington, D.C. It has 12,329 reviews.
Oh.
And it's averaging 4.2 stars.
Not bad, White House.
Yeah. Let's try to call it. You want to?
Sure.
Here we go.
You do the talking.
Let's flip a coin to see who does the talking. Yes.
No.
Yes, here we go. Call it heads or tails. I let you call it last time.
Ugh.
Go ahead.
Heads.
Hey Siri, flip a coin for us. Hey Siri, flip a quarter for us.
Okay,
Siri,
we're losing listeners.
Hey Siri, flip a coin for us.
I'm not sure I understand.
All right, just call the White House.
Hey Siri, flip a quarter for us.
I didn't get that.
Okay,
could you try again?
What did I say last time?
Call the White House.
A stylus is a writing utensil or a small tool for some other form of marking or shaping, for example,
Hold on a second.
in pottery.
I am sorry,
Hey, Siri,
everybody. I am
flip a quarter
sorry.
for me.
It's all good.
Okay, honestly, can you give up?
Well,
I know that you're a very
don't-
driven person, but
yes.
it's okay that didn't work out. Just call the White House. Just get the White House on the phone, will you?
Okay. Are you talking?
No, I don't know. Let's figure it out in real time. Just call.
Okay.
I mean, do you think anybody's actually going to answer?
I don't know. That's why we're calling.
Thank you for calling the White House comment line. The office is temporarily closed. Your comment is important to President Donald J. Trump.
Oh.
If you'd like to send a message to the president, please visit our website at www.whitehouse.gov/contact. For the most up-to-date information about the coronavirus, its common symptoms, and
Well, there you go.
I mean, I guess a little anticlimactic there.
Yeah, I thought somebody could answer, and I was not going to talk. I was going to make you do it.
Yeah, I believe that.
I wanted to jump into the content for today.
I think that's a good idea based on how this has all been transpiring so far in the first several minutes.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Let's get to the meat of it.
we'll get there. I just came from a breakfast with my father, who is,
nice.
yes, on his way out of town. And so it's always fun to have conversations with your parents about life and then also about your children, right? Grandparents are in this unique position
Right.
to offer input on parenting, especially in light of how they feel they did with you, which there's something about growing older that I think can make you susceptible to second guessing and questioning and fear, just because it's always going to be easier to see what's not versus what is, what went wrong, what you would do differently versus
Sure.
just being okay with, hey, I did my best and my best produced these results, and I'm gonna be okay and live with it.
It's super easy to look back in retrospect and wish you did things differently.
So we got into this conversation about parenting.
Okay.
I have a 15-year-old, soon to be 16, here in the next 2 weeks, and we just started talking about like what needs to exist when it comes to raising children that are going to bring you peace later in your life versus an absence of peace or even heartache. I know you have heard me say before that it's choose now or choose later. Like, choose to do the hard thing now when you have your kids and they're in your home and they're younger. Choose to discipline them and instruct them now. Or if you cave to it because you want them to be friends or like you will pay later. Pay now, pay later. You are going to pay when it comes to parenting. Like, at the end of the day, you will pay. It's just whether or not you want to pay now or defer it. And I've always hated that in other areas of my life when I'm just too tired to do something. And so I defer.
Well, it's so easy to just give a credit card number.
Yeah.
Worry about it later.
Yeah.
Rather than come up with the cash.
Yeah. And so, but the problem with that, as you know, is a lot of the unexpected always happens and you end up paying so much more on the backside than if you would have just paid on the front side. And so we were having this conversation and I was just telling him that we'll see how it's going to work out. But I think I've taken an entirely different approach to parenting than what maybe a lot of people take.
None of us are surprised by that.
Well,
Go on.
That's just kind of my MO, I guess.
I know.
But I think of it using like a seed and soil as the illustration. And too often I think we get focused on the seed itself, which would be the child, versus the soil that the child is placed in.
Mm-hmm.
And this comes from my belief in energy and just understanding the fundamental principles of energy and reading a lot of Einstein's work about energy matters because all matter is energy. And I'm always suspicious of my intentions when it comes to how I lead or interact with anyone. Because it's way too easy to lead out of a deficit or to make decisions based on what I want the situation or the person's behavior to say to me to make me feel better than a longer term vision that is better for the person than it even would be better for me as the parent, the teacher, the coach, or the leader.
Can you give an example?
Yeah. I say even in pastoring, or being a leader or an owner of a business, I think too often we can make decisions based on how we want things to look and how we want the public to perceive us. And so we make decisions and steer people or give direction based on trying to fix how something looks versus getting way down into the soil and fixing the dynamics or the variables that are causing the problem. And the reason why we steer away from that often is because it takes longer to get to the heart or the root of the problem when it comes to results.
Yeah.
But actually, it just looks that way and feels that way. Really, in life, the quickest way to success and less heartache is by going straight to the roots anyways.
Right.
You might feel better about putting a Band-Aid on something, because you kind of did something and you can't see the nastiness or the open wound. But at the end of the day, you're just delaying. You're going to see it a lot longer and deal with it a lot longer than getting to the roots. And I think, some of our Judeo-Christian history that came from the Catholic Church over in Europe, we have accidentally fallen into behavior modification and morality-driven religion versus the movement that Jesus gave us, which included a magic tool bag of very magical tools like grace, mercy, forgiveness, and the righteousness of Christ that allows us not to obsess over our failures or our mistakes. And I think our obsession with not quote unquote messing up, or at least appearing to mess up, manifests itself nowhere more than it does in our parenting and with our children.
Oh, I had something to say, but you just derailed it. But
Well,
I'm going to say it anyway.
I
because
did not mean to derail it.
No, I know. I agree that it manifests a lot in parenting, but I was just having a conversation yesterday with somebody about their marriage and
Sure.
these kind of issues that are manifesting in one way that the husband and wife are getting so caught up in the manifestation of like her thinking about somebody from her past. And I'm like, this is nothing. Like
Sure.
you are spending way too much of your emotional energy talking and thinking about the manifestation, and the manifestation is nothing. It's like we say, the real reason everything happens for a reason, right? It's like manifestation that's wasting your time right now because it's coming out of the root that you guys are not talking about or looking at.
Yeah.
And so it's going to keep manifesting in different ways.
100%. And it will never go away because the root is not being addressed. And I can't state this or even overstate this enough. And I don't know that I can fully articulate the dynamics of this and how important it is to try to understand it. But it really is at the heart of good Christian theology. And the word theology is two words, ology, which means the study of, and theos is God. And so theology is the study of God, and every single decision we make in life can be brought back to that question, who is God? And avoiding diving deep into that question and just instead applying it to this specific context, how we handle and respond to failure says a lot about our theology. And when you look at people like St. Paul or David or Rahab, different characters, very important characters in both the Old and the New Testament, God chose to work through people and teach us truth through people that were very flawed and imperfect, and adulterers and murderers. And I think a lot of that, a main reason for that was to show us that this concept of grace, mercy, forgiveness, justification, righteousness is pivotal. Yeah. And here's why I say all of that. I said that to say this.
Okay.
And it's very relevant to parenting, let alone our marriages and everything else in life. To get weighed down and to be held back, you have to have a backdrop to which you can be pinned to. And I think of like a bulletin board, where you used to stick tacks in to put messages up to. if you really study the New Testament, Jesus came and died on our behalf and bore our shortcomings. It's the word sin, not hitting the bullseye all the time, and forgave us in advance, knowing what we would do before we even know what we would do. Mm-hmm. And if you believe mercy, grace, and forgiveness, one, you're supposed to apply that to others and let them go when they ask for forgiveness. And even when they don't ask, you're supposed to demonstrate mercy and extend to them what has been extended to you from Jesus himself, which is, I forgive you. You just have to ask, and I forgive you. The second part of it is you really do have to live a life of forgiveness. And it's like a 10-to-1 ratio. For every 10 times you have to forgive someone else, or for every 1 time you have to forgive someone else, 10 times you have to forgive yourself.
Yeah.
And we don't think about that. Mm-hmm. But often what manipulates us as leaders and parents and grandparents is that backdrop of the failure of mistakes, that this is going to be pinned to me. I'm going to have to carry this. I'm going to have to live with this. What if I make this mistake? What if I'm not good enough? What if this doesn't work out? Like, all of those questions come back to, there is something that you're allowing to be pinned to you, or this backdrop, which is the fear of failure, that keeps you from being able to move forward and let your losses go, or your mistakes go, and move on and develop as fast as possible. And similar to what you were saying with this example, you've heard me say multiple times that good quarterbacks have a short memory, that they can't afford to come out on the next series after throwing an interception or fumbling the ball and live with that guilt or heaviness, because it's going to lose the game. Right. So if you just continue with that football analogy, when it comes to parenting, whether it's the child or the parent themselves, it's one thing to throw an interception and to make a bad decision, right? Like a really bad decision.
Sure.
It's another thing to stay underneath that and allow that to ruin the rest of your life.
Yeah.
That's no different than an ego-driven, pride-filled quarterback that throws a pick or fumbles a ball, and now all of a sudden they can't sling it on the next 5 series the way they should, because they're living with guilt and shame.
Yeah.
And I've never, contrary to what people would think, and this literally is really just poor theology that is systemic and cancerous throughout the Catholic and Protestant church. We really do not live into grace, mercy, forgiveness, justification by faith, and the imputed righteousness of Christ. And therefore, we die heavy because we're full of shame and guilt. That is the real problem in Catholic and Protestant faith, is that it's not our mistakes. If we had a good theology and we understood and really read and believed our Bibles and looked at the people that God used to communicate the power of these realities to us, we would move on really quickly from our failures. But we don't do it. And contrary to what a lot of people would believe, no one dies because they had an affair, spiritually speaking. No one loses their religion because they got tied up with pharmaceutical drugs and that led to other drugs and they had an addiction for several years. What I see all the time from 3 generations of a faith-oriented family is that we can't get past our mistakes. Yeah. And what's so ridiculous about that is that that's why Jesus died. Again, for all of the theologians listening to the podcast right now, if you really believe your Bible, two facts here. Prevenient grace, that God chose you, you did not choose him. And the only reason you responded to his calling was because his grace was moving in front of you, not behind you. You didn't find grace, grace found you. Okay. Then if you believe Philippians chapter 1, that he who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it, then all of a sudden we can start putting the power or the nucleus of our faith and the power of our faith in God versus in ourselves. And so when people start talking about how their decisions and their failures are going to affect God and change God's plan for that individual's life, they just have an inconsistent theology. Now, you can change your theology and come up with a scenario where God's goodness and his mercy and his grace pursuing you changes based on your response to it. But that's not what I see when I see the Apostle Paul or Peter or David, that God, despite what they did, God kept after them and kept showing and demonstrating love to them as a parent would a child. And so this shows up in the way we live our life and how we parent, because we're afraid of our children hurting. We don't want them to hurt. We don't want them to make mistakes. And so what we end up doing is, and this is where it gets really technical, but it's magical if you can figure it out. We become so fearful of them making mistakes that we do everything in our power to manipulate them from making mistakes, which sets them up to make more mistakes in life. Right. Fear is a form of faith. There is not faith in fear. There is faith. And fear is the bottom part of faith, the other end, the opposite of faith. Fear is a form of faith that things will not work out. And so all faith, which includes fear in life, is a bond that draws things to you. Whatever you put your attention on, right? Talking about Emotionships, whatever you fixate on, you draw to yourself, because you're connecting with your power and your energy through your thoughts to that thing. And so when I'm afraid that my kids are going to have sex before marriage, or I'm afraid that my kids are going to drink and get in a car, or I'm afraid that they're going to watch content on their phone, I'm actually exercising faith that things will not work out. And in doing so, and putting my energy into those realities, I'm creating them. Mm-hmm. I had a email pop up in my inbox today where someone is creating a business in my name with my email address in the state of Ohio, and I have no idea who this is, and I've got to get to the bottom of it. This is what we do. In the same way, if I was starting a business, I would go to the Secretary of State's website and put all of the information in and generate a document to make a legal entity that is recognized by people all throughout the state, to include there in the state capitol. This is what we do with our thoughts. We don't have to fill out an agent of record or paperwork to create new realities. We just do it with our energy through the form of thoughts and communication, and they become real. And so when it comes to our children, when we don't live into the idea of growth and advancement and moving forward with mistakes as the goal, like responsibility as the goal, what we end up doing is trying to hedge our bet by manipulating them into not making bad decisions. But the problem with emphasis is that emphasis is emphasis whether you like it or not. When you say, don't you dare get one of those cookies out of the cookie jar, apart from the word don't, you just talked about cookies in the cookie jar, and you're putting emphasis on it. Mm-hmm. And so it requires a lot of wisdom on our part to realize that emphasis is emphasis, and whether it's good or bad, whatever we give attention to grows. You know, you've heard me say before, I don't discipline my children for specific actions. I discipline my children for disobedience, because disobedience can look like a number of things, and disobedience doesn't always or isn't always associated with something that is bad. Honestly, if we're getting really deep into it, sin, missing the mark, or disobedience can only use things that are real, but it just does it at the wrong time, right? So if we were going to talk about alcohol, the difference between it being sin and not sin is when the state says you're able to drink, you're at a legal age, right? Mm-hmm. Or if you have a personal conviction that you shouldn't do it, you don't do it because you're honoring what you sense to be true or believe to be true for you. It only becomes sin when we take it out of context or out of bounds. Sin, missing the mark, has to have a bullseye, right? The Greek word is hamartia, which means to miss the mark, and it's the idea of throwing darts. It's a bullseye. What does that tell us? You can't miss the mark without a mark being there. And that's why I wrote that post years ago, that sin is not a something. It's not a physical something. It's just taking things out of context. And so getting back into the idea of parenting, it's a seed versus soil. And most parents and grandparents focus on the seed, and they want to talk the seed into looking the way it needs to look. They literally want to, put braces around it and tie it to things as it starts to have little shoots to get it to look the way they think it should look. Yeah. But anybody that handles agriculture knows that the life of the seed has primarily is the soil. It's what's in the soil that brings the potential out in the seed.
You just said a whole lot.
I did.
I don't even know where to begin, but something that I think can be really hard is that as parents, it's really hard not to have an idea of what you want the seed to look like.
Sure.
And so,
why do you think that is?
Well, because we all have ideas in our head of the child that we want to produce, right? Like that we want to raise.
Or what success is for that child.
Sure. And so I think about this often. I mean, my girls are super young, but I try to be like expansive Darren and I both try to be expansive in like who they can become. But there are things, I think a lot of parents think about who they don't want their kids to become.
Sure.
And so I try to focus on like, I want them to be kind people.
Right.
If they're kind and gay,
yeah.
Okay. Like I want them to be kind.
Sure.
More than what I don't want them to be.
Sure.
Which is a lot easier said than done, but
you're going to get in trouble.
But it's true. I mean, I'm not going to not talk to my kid if...
Isn't it funny how people will hear what they want to hear with what you just said?
Yes.
With the spirit of it being...
But I was very intentional in using the word gay,
for sure.
For sure. Using that example, because I know that's a big one for people. Like,
for sure.
As long as my kid's not gay, I'm fine. Like, everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, well, your kid's a bully, so you didn't do that great of a job anyway.
Yeah, or arrogant as hell.
Right. Yeah.
But as long as they're not gay.
But if they're not gay,
woo,
success.
Boy, was I successful.
Yeah. But Darren and I talk about that, not a lot, but we don't really focus on it. But it's a conversation that's come up with like, what if they grow up to be this and this and this, then what does that mean about us?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So.
But that requires a backdrop. Right.
Sure.
And that's what I'm saying. Like,
and so, yes. So that is what I'm saying is like, do you not have a backdrop? Are you going to say more about your approach to parenting? Because you said you have one that's different.
Yeah, sure.
And I think you've described it kind of in a roundabout way.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it has to do with projecting and living and inviting them into what I think they need to see and what needs to be demonstrated for them versus, like you're saying and articulating, avoiding telling them what they're not.
Yeah. Yeah. I go to bed.
Modeling light versus scaring them away from darkness.
Well, and is there anything more helpful than letting your kids see you fail?
No, I don't think so.
Fail like, well,
but that even works off of a premise. What is failure in your mind?
Well, like right now, what I'm thinking about is like when I lose my temper with my kid and the way that I come back from it. Like when I go to bed at night and I think like, okay, how did this day go? Like, what do I want to improve upon? The most, for lack of a better word, like pride that I feel as a parent is when I've gone to my kid and told her I'm sorry.
Sure.
Like that I feel really good about. I don't feel good about why I have to say I'm sorry, but that I can go back to her and she has no idea. She'll just be like, okay. But that I can go back to her and say like, Ev, I really should not have spoken to you like that. I'm really sorry. Like that, I think is a win as a parent.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I will make statements to our children based on priorities that we have. Like, it's better to be honest than it is to be right. Mm-hmm. Because I know from being put in different business situations that my responsibility is to be honest when I'm wrong, because that's the way to live your life, because that's what creates the life that other people want to be a part of. And so if as a parent, you're not getting really intentional about teaching points as you live life with your children to where you can say, hey, at times you're going to be tempted to make it look right when it's not. Mm-hmm. And you need to focus on being honest more than you do being right, because though being honest might appear or feel like it's going to be an initial setback, in the long run, you will go further faster if you are honest, because in the depths of everyone's core, one of the things that we have in common is that everybody knows they are imperfect. And so when we get a chance to say sorry, or when we get a chance to own our mistakes, people, that don't know better think that that's weakness. It's not, it's strength. And that's one of the things being in the restaurant industry that I've learned is that you never, ever throw away your opportunity to apologize or say sorry and to own your mistakes. It draws people to you. And so modeling meekness and forgiveness and mercy is how you get ahead. And so that's when it comes to, how we parent, for me, it's so much more about what we're demonstrating and who we are as people than it is any talking point, any specific talking point.
I think the word intentional you have used a couple times. I think that's so important, especially when you're raising like more than one kid.
Sure.
I mean, when you're raising any kid, but like knowing you can, it's not like a one size fits all thing for kids in one family. Like Evie and Annie are completely different people already. I can see that. And Evie needs, I think my husband and I were just talking to you about this, about when he was disciplining her because she hit or did something physically abusive to her sister. And so Darren like put her in a timeout and wanted her to say that she was sorry and kept trying to get her to say she was sorry. She wouldn't do it because she's stubborn just like me. And probably 30 minutes later, she's sitting underneath the kitchen table and you just hear this, like we'd moved on, whatever. And you just hear this little sorry coming from underneath the kitchen table. And it's like, I told Darren, like, it freaks me out how much I understand my 2-year-old daughter.
Sure.
Like that is me. Like even still as a 36-year-old, like 30 minutes later will come back and say, sorry.
Yeah.
In my own timing.
But it's beautiful in the sense that she's different. Evie's a processor and she thinks about a lot and she sees a lot. And especially at this age, she needs the time to be able to get to the conclusion herself. And this would shock people that someone so young is already developing adult-like habits that will shape their adulthood for the rest of their life. Even at this age, she already understands integrity because God's law is written on her heart. And she knows that if she just, and some parents will not believe this, what I'm saying, and that's fine. But she already knows that her sorry needs to come from her heart, not daddy's mouth. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing, and we understand this now because of psychology and communication, and there's just so many more tools that parents have access to. But she literally needed the time for it to feel authentic and genuine, to process it. She heard it from her parents, but then wanted the space and distance to make it her own. Mm-hmm. And then the conviction set in, knowing what was right. And 30 minutes later, she whispers, because now her pride is still involved. Oh, yeah. And she doesn't want to look like a failure because already she's trying to get her parents' approval through her behavior. She whispers out to do it, but not to be too loud about it and expose herself. Sorry. Mm-hmm. And so it's just amazing how easy it can be to come in with brute force and manipulate our children because we want them to say sorry right now. You apologize to your sister or brother. You
start to feel like, well, then they must not be learning the lesson, right? Like they're not learning the lesson if it's not like an immediate response. And that's what's so hard is trusting that like they're processing. But
think about this with what you're saying, right? That you want them to learn the lesson or you're afraid they won't learn the lesson. There's the backdrop.
Yeah.
Failure. What if they're not good enough? What if they don't do it? What if I'm not good enough as a parent? What if I don't equip them? Right? That's got to be there.
How do you stay in like the middle ground where it's like, it's not, because most of us probably know parents that it's like, they're just super flippant and it's like, well, whatever, my kid's fine. Like there's no, I mean, I feel like there has to be some backdrop in terms of like, line, some sort of guidance and some sort of
that's a great question. When you were starting to talk about this, and then I responded just talking about how delicate our children are, and we need to be, if we're stressed or overworked, we're not going to have, our nerves are going to be too fried. Our nervous system and our parasympathetic nervous system is going to be so on fire that we don't get it. We don't see the fine actions. And it made me think of a quote that I saw that somebody put up on Instagram. Actually, it's Martha Shaker. Martha,
Hi, Martha.
If you're listening.
Oh, she is.
It was about our Supreme Court Justice, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Yes, that just passed. She put out this quote from her, and I really like it, that it's not fragile like a flower, fragile like a bomb.
Yeah.
Did you see this?
Yes, I did.
And it's so true when it comes to parenting, that our children are fragile, but not like a flower, like you're going to crush them.
Yeah.
Like a bomb, in that they have all of this potential, and we just need to treat them that way. Mm-hmm. Right? We can't approach it as if they're an animal. They are an adult in training. And their first, so many years are very, very important. You've got to respect them. Respect your child. They are a human being, the way you want it to be respected. Mm-hmm. I think the backdrop that you're referring to that's so important are core values. What are your home's core values? And failure, I would put one about failure in there, but failure to me, and this is what I say to my children, and this is how failure is known in our house, it's an unwillingness to learn or try. That's it. Mm-hmm. I don't care what mistakes they make. And someone will say, well, what if they make a mistake and ruin their life with that mistake? It is what it is. I'm not going to live my entire life on defense, praying and hoping my kids don't make mistakes.
Well, and what is a ruined life? Like, as long as you're still breathing, I feel like.
Well, it's the vocabulary that comes from people that have lived in fear their whole life, and they don't live. I think of that quote from Braveheart, and it's been probably 10 years since I've seen the movie Braveheart, but he's in this phase of his life, which I think most people know William Wallace was a true character in history. And a true quote of his is that he was being confronted with the fact that he was going to die because he had already been captured. And he said something to the extent of, it's not the fear of dying that he dealt with, it's the fear of never truly having lived. And he lived his life and changed Scotland's history because he was more afraid of not living than he was dying.
Right.
And so when we raise our children in a soil, in a context, in an environment that is full of fear of what could go wrong, they never live.
Yep.
And so my responsibility is to help my children trust me so that I can guide them and help them get to their full potential, which requires a lack of fear when it comes to failure. Mm-hmm. And, so that's why I don't heavily watch over their shoulder or monitor them, because the indirect result of watching everything your kid does is you are indirectly communicating to them that they do not have the ability or the integrity or the intentions to live their life on their own. Yep. And so what ends up happening, and if you're listening, I hope you don't have to figure this out for yourself. There are plenty of books you can read and plenty of examples you can watch, and maybe your life is one of them. They will go away from you because they can't trust you. Every child is looking for someone that they can trust, even when they're young. A lot of parents they have children that are liars because the child has learned very easily or very quickly that they can't trust their parent with their emotions. Yeah. Why? Because their parent's a hothead. Or maybe they're not a hothead. Maybe they're just stressed out and overworked, so they overreact to everything. And so when a child that is 2.5 feet tall and 30 pounds looks up at this giant adult that they can't understand, and they read the tone in their voice and the anger on their face, did you do that? Of course they're going to lie. Angry parents produce lying children. Mm-hmm. And you know whose fault it is? It's your fault, mom or dad. It's not their fault. They're just they're working with the cards that they've been dealt.
Well, and I'm so the good cop. Like, so is the parent. right? Like the parents dealing with the cards that they've been dealt too. And so that doesn't remove responsibility from them for how they raise their kids, but it's like, it's all being passed down.
Someone has to step in and stop the cycle, the negative cycle.
Sure. 100%.
And it's just understanding that your child is complex, full of potential, and anytime you gravitate toward the negative side of faith, which is fear, you are going to attract to you what you are trying to keep from them. And again, we don't have to obsess over failure if we put some values out there and live into the values, even in the presence of quote unquote failure or falling short of where we wanted to go. But see, I take these few short years where my children are with me, and I try, my main goal is trust, that they can communicate with me and trust me. I don't want them to face difficulty on their own. More than having sex before marriage, I'm more concerned about them talking to me and asking me questions about sex and what it's about and when you should and when you shouldn't. Yeah. One leads to the other. And what parents don't understand is you're creating the environment where they are afraid to talk to you because you talk about it in such a negative way with so much fear that they don't feel like they can trust you with their inner curiosity, that their emotions, they're not safe emotionally with you. And so they go somewhere else.
Right.
And so what's the real problem? Is the real problem the behavior or the act that they could commit, or that the one person God gave them to lead them and guide them is untrustworthy or unapproachable? And you know, I can hear it now. People saying, well, I'm approachable, I'm trustworthy. Says who? You? You don't get to make that decision if you're trustworthy.
How do you know if your kids, I mean, is it just like if your kids come to you and talk to you about sex, then you know that you're in a good place?
You can't control the outcomes, but you can control your behavior. You can control going to them and going out of your way to do things for them that creates trust. But even then, your best attempts might fall shorter than you would like for them to fall. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's how do we be proactive with some of these conversations? But overall, when your child messes up, you've got a great opportunity to build trust. There's never a greater opportunity to build trust with your child than when they mess up. You know, and again, I fail in this area and fall short, especially with my older son, where, you know, I'll be firm and direct with him more than I am a lot of my employees because the stakes are higher. Sure. But I always have to come back and own my attitude. You know, if it's about cutting grass or how he's carrying himself in a business environment because he's already working in one of our organizations, like I've got to own my shortcomings and say, okay, here's what I was trying to say. I didn't say it the right way, or I said it with too much attitude, or I insulted you as a person and defamed your dignity. Please forgive me. You don't deserve that. Yeah.
I think that's so important too, of like not only being aware of the words that you say, but how you say it, because you can say quote unquote the right words.
Sure.
But your kids, I mean, I think no matter their age, they can pick up on your energy.
Well, the reality of it is in North America, we really struggle to understand that we communicate so much more than our words. It's not even funny.
Oh, for sure.
Right. You know, there are times where I'm really tired at night and the kids have already gotten in bed and maybe I got home late or I was on the phone when they went up, and I have to force myself to get up off of the couch and go kiss them goodnight and have an intentional conversation because I'm trying to demonstrate and be intentional about what's important. Mm-hmm. And that's what I mean by, I don't think that the potential for failure should be the backdrop in our homes. I think our core values should be the backdrop. And so if it comes to failure, you know, or when it comes to failure, it would be an unwillingness to learn or an unwillingness to try. So let's say that my 15-year-old, you know, has friends over, and this is not a real situation, I'm making it up, but let's say my 15-year-old had, you know, friends over, and I find out that they went out back late, you know, in the backyard and drank beer together, which is illegal and has ramifications. How do I handle that in a way that maintains his dignity, but yet communicates the seriousness of what could go wrong and what the potential consequences could be?
Are you going to answer?
I mean, it's hard to guess what I would do in that situation. But
what do you hope you do?
Well, the point that I'm making is I'm hoping that I take that situation as an opportunity to communicate the seriousness of what went wrong when you're breaking the law and when other people are involved. But at the same time, I have an opportunity there to create and grow trust. And so it would probably be something like, nothing happened this time, but we need to make sure that every one of your friends tell their parents what happens. They have, you guys have this much time to communicate it to your parents yourself. And then I'm going to follow up and communicate with them as to what happened. And here's what could have happened or what potentially will happen when you break the law like this. And then someone would say, well, okay, good. How do you put the hammer down? Yeah. How do you really put the hammer down so this doesn't happen again? Oh, that's a great question. Instead of beating them, at almost 16 years old, for me, and that's the only person I can answer for right now, for me, I would say, now listen, I can't prevent this from happening again. Yeah. But what I can do is tell you of the serious consequences and with all of my heart, beg you not to do it again. Because next time it could come down to you guys do this and something else gets introduced or you get in a car and someone is killed. Mm-hmm. I can't prevent it. Mm-hmm. I can't stop it. I'm not always going to be with you. I can't always watch over you. You have to live your own life. And at some point in time, I have got to put the keys to your life in your own hand, and you have to take responsibility for it. Mm-hmm. And if that were to happen and there was a tragic accident because of it and you killed someone else or someone else killed you, I would have to live with knowing that I did my best to empower you and to protect you through that empowerment versus manipulate you and try to literally physically keep you from doing those things.
Yeah.
Because at some point in time, whether you like it or not, parent or grandparent, they're out from underneath your house. And so everything before your child leaves and gets out from under your roof is a trial run. That day is coming. Quit parenting as if that day is not coming. My job as a parent is not to prevent pain from my children. My job as a parent is to protect them and prepare them for when they leave and get out from under my roof. And so the difference with me and other parents is I view all of my days with my children as preparation. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to prepare them. I'm not trying to prevent things from happening. I'm not. I want them to trust me, and I'm trying to prepare them. And what people will get to see, because my life is seen from multiple angles by a lot of people, is whether or not this philosophy works. The idea of trust and preparation being serious points of emphasis for Amy and I when it comes to our kids. And for me, it's putting a lot of great things in the soil and trusting that ultimately God is in control more than I am. And I'll listen to see what God wants to say to me about my role and when to punish and when to show grace and all of those things. But at the end of the day, your job is not to be the protector more than the preparer. You're preparing your child to interact with the world out from under your supervision and your roof. And that starts from a very young age when you're disciplining them and giving them the space to own their apology versus just force it. Have you thought about how many people really struggle with the guilt of not being able to say sorry or apologize and mean it? Why? Because they were forced to. Why? Because their parent had an ego that was so attached to their child not looking like a failure and being able to fit in. So much so that they couldn't give them the space to actually grow at their own pace versus the pace their parent wanted them to grow at.
Sure.
And it's our most precious commodity. We love our children, and we should love our children. And all of us want our children to succeed, as we should. But like everything else in this Jedi, invisible, the Force type of thing, which Jesus is the initiator of it, and he just called it the kingdom instead of calling it the Force, it's always about being present and letting go. Not living in the future and holding on. This generation needs parents that can empower them by preparing them without the fear of failure. What episode is this?
35
5?
or 6. 35 and a half. I don't know.
Episode 36, everyone, of Emotionships, the podcast.